Are you aware of the trad wife movement and the videos that women my age are making in response to it? Well, I think that every homeschool mom should consider some of the things those ladies are saying. My name is Leslie Maddox, and on this channel, I like to talk about modern and minimal homeschooling. This will be a pretty balanced video because we're going to tackle both of those topics today. The modern aspect will be when we discuss this middle-aged response to trad wife content and what commonalities homeschool moms have with the concerns that are being raised about trad wives by the middle-aged women and how we can tackle that in our homes. So that's the modern element of this video. The minimal element will be something a little more fun, and that's what we're going to start off with. We're going to look at a few books that have been successes in our homeschool the past couple of weeks and what I've learned from that, because although we can learn from failures, we hopefully do learn from failures. I know I certainly have, and that's what I've focused on the last few weeks in these recaps, my struggles and failures and what I can learn from them. We can also learn from successes, so that's what I want to focus on this time around. The books that have been a success in our homeschool the past couple of weeks and what I've learned from that, and how I'm going to let that affect the way I choose books going forward, because while when it comes to books, I don't want to be totally minimal. I do want to be minimal in the sense that I don't purchase things that we don't use. I don't spend time on things that we don't enjoy, that don't have, a very positive effect in our homeschool. I don't want to read books just to read books. I want to focus on the right books, and I want to focus on quality and what's appropriate for us. So that's the minimal aspect of this video. So let's get into these books. As you can see, I have got a stack of books here, and we're going to start off with this trilogy right here. It was the Gilgamesh trilogy. So I've mentioned before, we're studying ancient times, or at least that's what I'm doing with my younger two boys. And as part of that, while they were working on a craft, I read these books aloud to them. And my plan had been just to read one of them each day, like one a day, and while they were working on a craft or maybe sitting on the couch. Although I'm trying to do things in order to somewhat multitask. If they're doing a craft related to our schoolwork, something where they could be paying attention to a story, that's what I want to do, or my reading aloud. And so I read through these, and my plan had been to do one a day. But as you can see, these are really beautifully done. It's an epic story. I mean, this art is just beautiful. I loved how, and I discussed this with my boys when we were studying Sumerian artifacts. We're not studying them, but we did watch some YouTube videos and looked at some pictures online to get an idea of Sumerian artifacts. And one of the things that was called out was how in their art they use these large eyes a lot. Look at this. I'll talk about this water damage in a minute, but I loved how, look at these large eyes. I love how the artist, illustrator incorporated that into this book using these exaggerated eyes. So that was really neat. You could see some of the, I guess this is cuneiform, and we studied that a bit as well. So that right here is one of the reasons that I really love these picture books, using picture books, even though my kids are, the two kids I'm doing this with are 5th and 7th graders, because it's so highly visual. My kids, their attention is definitely sparked by visual elements. Another reason I love these is because we can talk about things we learn, like the cuneiform and the large eyes that we saw in the artifacts. And, the clothing that we see here in these pictures that the illustrator used, does that look like the clothing that we saw on the artifacts? So I love all of those things about using picture books. Since my kids' attention was really captured by the visual elements of this book, in addition to the story, my youngest son, my 10-year-old, he got so into it, he kept getting distracted from what he was doing while I was reading the story, and I had to tell him, hey, keep working on your thing. I'll keep reading, and I was holding the book up so they could see the pictures. But he really loved it. So the second day, I think I read this one, The Revenge of Ishtar. And my son got so into it, and they were still working on what they were working on when I finished the book, that I said, well, maybe I should read the next book today. Should I just jump into that? And my 10-year-old said, yes, I'm really invested in this story. Definitely, I want to read the next book. That just cracked me up that he said he was invested in the story. He cracks me up. And I'll go ahead and flip through this last one. So that attention that was sparked, or that interest that was sparked by these visual elements, made my kids really invested in the story. And I think we all know by now that storytelling helps us to remember things. And so, yeah, I was really happy with that, how that turned out, that they enjoyed it. And maybe because of that, they'll remember what we've been learning about. As I said before in a different video, just because it's a picture book doesn't mean that we have little kid conversations about it. It does spark conversation. So besides sparking interest, it sparked conversations, a more grown-up conversation. So we're able to discuss the artifacts and the buildings and the clothing and the writing, but also we're able to see similar elements of the story as to the stories we see in the Bible about creation, the flood, and that kind of thing. And so that was really interesting for my kids to see that. And I mean, look at this right here. So we stopped in the reading and discussed this flood with the animals on this ship. And so we had more, maybe not grown up, but we had conversations appropriate to their ages and their intellect about the story and about this topic, even though it was a picture book. The picture book, because they were interested in it, it sparked those age appropriate conversations. So I really love that. So compare these beautiful illustrations to something like this. A couple weeks ago, we're also studying dinosaurs, so I pulled out some old dinosaur books I had. And I don't know that we ever even really read this one before. I did pull it out for them to look at if they wanted to. And while these are beautiful drawings, it's just not the same, and there's a lot of text on them. Uh, Maybe if they read it themselves, they'd be interested in it. I don't know that they would have been that interested in it as a read aloud. It just didn't spark the same interest, I don't think, as a very well done book. It's not that this isn't well done. This is more educational. But it's a different feeling than this. And so in the interest of minimal homeschooling, I'm going to focus on when I look for what books we're going to be reading in the future. And I already have a list, but I'm going to cull that list a little bit to see, like, okay, which ones, when it's just a picture book, which ones do I think are really going to capture their interest? And we're not going to read it just because it's having to do with the time of history that we're studying. If it's not going to interest them, it's not going to interest them, and I'm not going to waste my time. Let's have minimal waste of time. All right, so let me put those aside and look at a couple more. So this one, we just started studying Egypt and pyramids and that kind of thing. And this is a little scholastic book. I'm not sure where it came from. You know what? Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. I think I do know where it came from. But a little scholastic book you can see here. And it just looks like a typical little book, but when you start looking at it, you realize there are some interactive elements, one of my favorite things in books for kids. So like here we have this little overlay And then if we continue on, I think it's just the one where, okay, no, this is the book that was kind of filled with overlays. Isn't that neat? I mean, it's such a simple thing, but something about it just makes me so, so happy. And my kids loved it. This is the kind of book that I did start off reading it aloud, but this is the kind of book that I'm calling a browsing book. So I mentioned, I think it was last week in a recap, that one of the ways I'm dealing with getting a little too overwhelmed, having a little too much to do in our homeschool day is to take some reading that's nice but not necessary, or activities that are nice but not necessary, and maybe saving it for a time um, that would be wasted otherwise. And so this is a perfect example of that. I took this book and a few others that I'll show you, and I just put them in my backpack. I just keep a backpack, which is pretty roomy. I like this one because it has this top open situation, and pockets and all, and a laptop sleeve in there. I'll try to remember to link it down below. I got it off Amazon, and I just go and put these books in my backpack, and then I take this backpack like on Fridays or on the weekend, or if we have an appointment to go to, I take it with me. And if there's a little bit of downtime, I can pull out books like this and let them browse the books. So in our checklist for the day, our schoolwork checklist for each day, when it comes to books, I have them marked as either read, like in uppercase letters, read, which means they read that book, read aloud, which means I'm reading it to them, or now browse. And that's what I'm calling books like this one, browse it, where they can just sit and enjoy it. Let me show you another fun little one. This one is on the spot pyramids, and it doesn't have as many interactive elements. It does have the information split up into these little chunks, which I think makes it a little more interactive. They're still just reading it, but it's a little more interactive in the reading instead of just a wall of text. And then there are some places like here where they have like little flaps that you flip, and this one right here is real cute. This one I also started reading aloud and realized, oh, this could be a good browse book. And it's a short one, and it's a board book essentially, but still one that we learn a lot out of, and that was fun for my kids. Take a look at this one. If I'll look for these books on Amazon and see if they're available still. I'll explain to you in a minute why they might not be. But I'll look for them and put links down below if I find them. Okay, this one, prehistoric mammals. We were taking a look at woolly mammoths when we were looking at the Ice Age, and it's a pop-up book, it says here. My kids love pop-up books, and so do I. It's so sad when the pop-ups get broken because my kids will destroy things like that. So this makes it a little more interesting. I don't even care if they read all that text. This was a browse book. We went to Olive Garden and I had a little bit of time while my husband and I were enjoying our salad and breadsticks, and the kids were enjoying the breadsticks. And my youngest thought he was going to get on his iPad. I'm like, oh, no, sir, I've got books. And I pulled these out, and at first he was all kind of not real happy with me about it. But when he realized they were pop-up books, he got a lot more excited and a lot more happy, and he enjoyed himself. I saw the change in his demeanor. There's another one, Great Dinosaurs, a troll pop-up book. I don't know what that is. Troll. Oh, is that a brand? Anyway, so you see this is another pop-up book. This one has like these interactive elements. So a lot of text. And I think he did read some of the text. So I don't even care if he read it all. He probably learned something. He was invested in his learning. So that was interesting. I have a couple here that they've looked at a lot before. A couple of years ago, we were going through these books, and we weren't studying ancient times at that time, so they're just kind of looking at them. But I pulled them out again now that we're studying ancient times, so that maybe it'll mean a little bit more if they look at these books more in context of what we're learning. So this one, Egyptian pyramid, they haven't looked at this yet this time around. And this is Make Your Own Egyptian Pyramid. So I pulled this out just to see. It's very visual. It's not a storybook like the Gilgamesh books, but it's still very visual. And when the information is broken up like this, my kids do tend to pay attention to that. And so I like that. And then there's instructions, I think, back here for um, building this pyramid. I'm not sure if it came with a model or not. And I'll explain to you in a minute why I don't know. But that's not as interactive, but I like how the information is kind of broken up. And then this is a book my kids have loved just to look at it. And I'm hoping this will be a really fun book again for as we're studying ancient Egypt. This one does have a lot more interactive elements. So like it has things back here, this thing that you take out and fold open and look at, and instructions for an activity to do. There's something else back here too. Oh, I guess how to deal with this little pyramid situation. We've got some flaps here, and this is a booklet. Yes, this is a little booklet here. Look how beautiful this is. We've got a wheel here and more booklets and flaps and things to pull out. So this is a really interesting book because it's not just one thing. It's not just flaps. It's not just things to pull out. It's a variety of things. We even got this situation right here. Opens up. Oh, that's right. There's this coin in here. I mean, it's amazing. I love it so much. So that's throughout this book. It's got these types of. I'm sorry, I don't have enough room here. I should have made this the camera a little bit higher. But a lot of elements. So it's fun. So you just kind of. This is a book that you read with your eyes, but also with your hands because you're looking through here to see what can I do with it. And then once you take the trouble to find something, you want to read it. You know. And so this is a really neat book. I remember when I first got it, my kids were like, wow. And I think I have another one that's similar to it. Something happens with this one here, which I'm not going to take the time to figure out. But there's a lot of these little interactive elements. Oh, I forgot about this here. We were just learning about papyrus. That's what we did for science one day. We didn't make papyrus this year. We did something like that a different year, but we learned a little bit about it. This is The Mysteries of History. And who's this? AZ Books or AZ Books? I have to look to see what more that they have. So really fun book. So why was this a success in our homeschool? Because of those interactive elements. I found that something else that sparks attention, especially when it's a topic that kids might not be interested in, and this is why these books are such a success for us lately. Since it's the beginning of the school year, attitudes have not been awesome about school as we've adjusted to school and new routines. And also we're not morning people in my house. My husband's kind of a morning person, and one of my boys is somewhat a morning person, but none of my kids are morning people when it comes to getting things done in the morning. I'm sorry, I've got some light coming in here. I'll adjust that in a minute. Anyway, when it's a fun book, when it's very visual, when there's interactive elements, that helps cut through some of that crankiness about schoolwork. And once we can cut through that crankiness, that helps a lot. So I'm really taking note right now about that. That if I want to waste a minimal amount of time and waste a minimal amount of money, then I need to be very mindful. Again, not demure, but mindful about the books I choose and make sure that they are highly visual for my kids. And if they have interactive elements, then great. And there are other books that they're reading, like for their literature. Like right now, they're reading The Golden Goblet, And that's something that they read on their own, and they have a literature guide that they're going through. So these aren't the only books. Have no fear. We're doing age-appropriate things for them. Um, they they are reading through novels. They're going to be reading a lot of novels this year having to do with the periods of history that we're studying. And they will be learning literature topics and all through that. But these are more for in order to add to our history studies and incorporating books into that, because I am trying to get them to understand that they can go to books for information, not just Google, you know? Um, so now, why didn't I know where all these books came from and all? And still on the topic of minimalism, it's hard to be minimal with books, especially if you love books. Uh, But we definitely don't want to waste money, do we? And so there's a couple of different ways that we can go. I'm looking at my notes here if you see me looking down. There's a couple of different ways that we can be minimal in our homeschool book buying endeavors. And one of them is to go to used bookstores. There's where we used to live, there's a half price books. I loved it. And I think a lot of homeschoolers went there and sold the books that they were done with. And at some point, I need to do a similar thing. And so that's where I got this book and some other books like this. I think that's where I got this book, which is why if this came with a model, like I, I don't think I have it. Uh, so yeah, I don't think I have that, but that's okay because the content is still good. So look for a used bookstore. I saw one just today. We were going to church and I saw a sign for a used and new bookstore. I thought I'm definitely checking that out because I have learned the value of that. Now, the Gilgamesh books I got on Amazon. So on Amazon, you can buy, I think, well, I know you can buy new books, but you can also buy used books on Amazon. And I didn't realize I was buying. I think that's what ended up happening when I got these. I didn't realize I was doing that. So these came with water damage. And looking back, I'm like, you know what? I bet that was a used book. Now, of course, the first thing you want to do if you can, especially for something like this that you're not going to be reading over and over again. I mean, maybe you have a budding historian in your house who will want to read them over and over again. But if you do, great, you can buy them at that point. But first thing you might want to do is go to your library, and you may find a lot of these books, a lot of books about like the picture books there at your library. And I live in a large city. I'm in the Houston area. And so the libraries share with each other. So I can put a book on hold and then it can be delivered from another library to my local library and I can go pick it up there. The problem with that is if they don't have a lot of that book, then I may not know when I'm going to get it. And for our history studies this year, I have particular things I'm doing each week, and I just want to keep it moving. Because unlike in years past, I want to finish Ancient Times this school year. I don't want it going for a couple of years. So I'm being a little more strict about my schedule this year when it comes to our history studies. So when I realized that I wasn't going to get the books when I wanted to, I realized, okay, so free is not going to work for me this time around. I'm just going to go ahead and buy them. And apparently I got something used because I did have some water damage. That was irritating at first. This one I think was also used, but like in better condition. And then I think this one, if it was used, and then it was in perfect condition. But you can purposely look for used books on Amazon and even say like, how good do you want it to be? Very well loved? Is that okay with you? Or do you want just books that are in very good condition? And when I purposely look for used books on Amazon, and I do sometimes, especially when it comes to things like this, I usually will look for books that are in like very good condition. I don't want missing pages. And typically I wouldn't want the water damage that I received on this one because that was a bit of a hiccup during our reading aloud. But consider looking for used books on Amazon. and that'll help you spend the minimal amount of money on all the books. If you're all about the books, hit the like button and follow me for more homeschool content. But if you're still wondering what homeschool moms have in common with trad moms and why that's a concern, hear me out. Before you hear me out, obviously, it's another day, it's the next day. I was thinking about the recording I did yesterday. In this second part, I wasn't real happy with it because it was a difficult emotional topic to discuss. And so I did a lot of meandering and rambling during it. I mean, I always do, but I really wanted to get a particular message across. And I think I can do it better in a more concise way. Um, if there are aspects of this topic that anybody wants to talk more about, dive more deeply into, that's fine. We can do that in another video. It is a big meaty topic, but I can't do all that in this video. So I'm going to try to say what I got to say in a more concise way. I'm going to refer to my notes that I've got on the screen in front of me in order to kind of keep myself on task. And I'm going to file my nails while I'm doing this because I think doing something with my hands will help me to stay a little more emotionally stable is not the right word, but a little emotionally disengaged from it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so I can discuss it kind of like what I talked before about how when I'm having a hard day um, with the kids and all that, sometimes I just need to step back and emotionally so that I can solve whatever problem I'm having instead of just being in the problem, so I can respond instead of react. And so I want to share this in a concise way. So I've already rambled a lot. Let's get to it. Trad wives. What's a trad wife? This was something I wasn't too sure about. I meant to today watch some trad wife content because that's not something that's served up to me usually, like ever, really, when I'm on YouTube, and I'm hardly ever on Instagram anymore just because, there's only so many hours in the day. But from what I understand it, a trad wife is someone who, or is a woman who glamorizes traditional gender roles. And maybe that's an unfair way of putting it because the word glamorize, so then that makes it sound like, I can see how some people will take offense to me making the idea of traditional gender roles in a family, making that sound bad. I guess I'm not meaning to offend anybody with that because I used to be one of you. I don't want to offend you. I think that's our own journey. Each woman has to have her own journey. And when it comes to that kind of thing. So that's what I understand a trad wife is. And the way that I understand it, it's glamorized is by making content where there's very much a 50s aesthetic sort of where they're dressed up really nicely and they're making elaborate meals and caring for the children all while looking perfect and all. And also what I understand is there's this idea, and in a lot of religious circles, this is the thinking. And again, I used to be part of that, so I'm still a Christian, but I don't think like this anymore. Who's calling me? Oh, spam. Okay, so I think I'll ignore spam. Anyway, from what I understand, part of the traditional gender roles is where the man is the final decision maker on things, the husband, and how that ends up happening is that since he's the financial provider, then it's his name on the bank account and maybe even his name on all the property, that the wife's name isn't part of all that. He's the final decision maker on all the things. And so that's his part of the bargain that's struck with his wife, that he's the financial provider and the decider of all things, and or the final decider on all things. And her role is to be focused on being a wife and mother, and to do that in this beautiful, like being the perfect wife and mother. kind of way. So that's the trad wife content, where they're trying to make it all seem this way of living and thinking, because really it's about the thinking, right? So this way of thinking, looking beautiful, and maybe causing young women to aspire to that. Because many of us, and I'm one of those, many of us, even as young women, really wanted to be a wife and a mother. And I always wanted to stay home with my children. So when you see content like that, I can see how people really get sucked in and then believing all the rest of it, that maybe they don't have a role outside of the home ever. The trad wife thinking, as I understand it, again, is different from what we think of as stay-at-home moms, because a woman may stay home with her kids for more practical reasons, not because she feels like she should, like that's the only choice she has, but maybe because of the expensive daycare, or maybe she just wants to be a homemaker like me. I did want to be home with my kids. That's different from thinking you don't have another choice. That's very, very different from that. And so let's not get the two confused. However, this past week, I saw a video, which was a compilation of shorter videos created by women my age. I'm 50. So women in their, I guess, 40s and 50s who maybe had that trad wife life and it didn't turn out so well for them. And so when they see the trad wife content, they're trying to give a warning to these young women, not just making the content, but who might be seduced by that way of thinking and get themselves into a pickle later in life. So they're trying to give warnings about, things that you may not think about when you see the beautiful trad wife content. And when I saw this video, I thought, wow, that those warnings could also apply not just to stay-at-home moms, but to homeschool moms. Not all homeschool moms stay at home, of course. So if this video doesn't apply to you, ignore me. Skip this part. I was just talking to a stay-at-home mom or a homeschool mom yesterday who works full time and homeschools her child. And so what I'm specifically speaking about are women like me who haven't been in the workforce in years and haven't really been making money, because there's lots of moms who have businesses at home and who are making money in some way. I haven't been, not really, like I've been on YouTube, but it's been a hobby. And so it hasn't been a moneymaker for me. And so I thought, there's a lot of women like me who this content that these mothers or these women are making in response to the trad wife movement, that this applies to. So I thought I would just mention that, the warnings to you, and explain them a little more in depth. And so let's go from there. So let's just talk about these warnings. One of them is that these ladies explained was that just because they, and this is me paraphrasing what many women are saying, but if I had to summarize, I'd say that a warning that they're giving is that just because they were holding up their end of the bargain, this verbal contract they had with their husbands or their exes at this point, by not having a job outside of the home and instead staying home with their kids and being primarily a mother and a wife, not making a fuss about not having their names on property, and essentially getting an allowance from their husbands. The deal was that their husbands would provide for them financially, and they lived often beautiful lives. They had everything provided for them. They lived in nice homes. They took luxury vacations. They bought expensive clothing. But just because they're willing to live up to their end of the contract didn't mean that their husbands were. And I'm not speaking this over anybody. This is just a reality that these women presented about their own lives, that their marriages ended. And, sometimes their husbands moved on very quickly, or their exes moved on very quickly with somebody else, sometimes even in the family home, because just because you're the mom doesn't mean you're going to get the family home. And even if you did, like, you couldn't, if you don't have a job, if you don't have money, if you don't have a work history, and all, and credit, like, you're not gonna be able to pay for the family home, which is why you might not get it. And yeah, there's childcare and alimony, but like one woman shared, her husband really wasn't paying those things as he should, as he was probably court ordered to do. It was a hassle to get that money. And so, like this particular woman, she was working 3 jobs just for her kids to eat. Because she, even though she helped run a business that was not in her name at all, uh, it was just her husband's or her ex's name on it. Even though she helped to run a business and then tried to get a job in that field, she didn't have any proof that. I mean, no employer was going to look at her, and she even had one guy kind of laugh and say, like, "You should not be interviewing for these jobs. You're not qualified." She had no proof to give to an employer that she could do those jobs. Yeah, there was nothing on paper. It was just her saying, "Hey, I managed our home and I did these things in my family business," and uh, but that wasn't proof enough for an employer. So that's one warning that they give. Another warning, and this is something I've thought about myself in particular, that especially being an older mom, and I'm 50 and my husband's a couple years older than me, and we have these younger kids. My youngest is 10, and so I do think about mortality and being there for my kids. And so the other warning was, well, what if something happens to your husband? He's the financial provider. Maybe he wants to continue to provide for you to keep up his side of the bargain. But if something happens that he can't, even if he wants to, that he physically can't, then what are you going to do? Yeah, life isn't fair. Things can happen, and yes, we can pray, but that doesn't mean that just because we pray and just because we're Christians, doesn't mean that nothing bad is ever going to happen to us. That doesn't mean that life is going to be fair to us. People really get that confused sometimes. Life can be really unfair. And sometimes if we don't live in wisdom, even if we do live in wisdom, but if we proceed with decision making without wisdom and don't do it in a wise way, we can end up suffering from the consequences of our own decisions. So I'm not going to get distracted by like all those rabbit trails, but the point is, if your husband does not live up to his end of the bargain, or if because either he refuses to or because he just can't, then what happens? These women, and I think a lot of women, if we're completely dependent on our spouses for financial support, left with no money, no credit, no skills, no job history. Essentially, we don't exist on paper. We don't have any visible footprint in the world. We just have like this ancient dinosaur footprint I've realized I have, because my job history in the computer industry, I haven't been in the computer industry in 15 years. So if I were going to go back and try to get a job right now, my skills are old. I have those ancient dinosaur computer skills, and I'd have to start from the bottom if I could even get in. Even if I would be hired for a job, I'd probably have to do some training. That's why I am taking courses online now. I'd have to do some training to improve myself before I could even get hired to an entry level position. Is probably what would happen with me. And so that's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but it's just the truth. And running from the truth doesn't help anybody. So as a mom, I want to protect myself and my children in the eventuality that some unfair life events happen. So I've got to do what I got to do that. But it also occurred to me that what I talked about in the last video about protecting my true self and rediscovering myself and what I like and what I'm interested in and what I'm good at and that kind of thing, that goes hand in glove with this topic, because it occurred to me that if I am doing the things I need to do to, having my own bank account. Have your own bank account, ladies, with your own money in it. Finding a way to put money in that bank account. Developing skills and having some kind of work that I do outside of home, that income producing work where I can prove my skills to somebody, or even starting my own business or whatever. Uh, those Doing those things that will protect my future and my children's future if something bad were going to happen. Uh, they would also serve to help protect my true self, because when our when we as homeschool moms, or as moms, stay-at-home moms, women, when our existences are subsumed into the existence of somebody else, our children, our husbands, uh, it's not just us that forgets that we exist. It's kind of the world in general. And yeah, while we exist in the hearts of our families and the people that love us, but if I need to go out into the world and do something that's income producing, I mean, even just having a place to live, and having the credit to be able to even just rent a place if something were going to happen, if we had to like sell our home and all that. Um, if I had to do all those things, I need to live in more than just my family's hearts. I need to exist on paper. And so that's my goal. Yeah, this is a new these are new marching orders I'm giving myself. That yes, last week my focus was on protecting my true self. I realized, this can serve two things. Like, if I make it my goal to exist on paper, to have a visible footprint in the world, not some ancient dinosaur footprint, but like a current modern footprint in the world, then not only am I protecting my future and my children's futures, but I'm also protecting my true self, because it feels good to accomplish things. It feels good to be capable. If I'm able to um, do some income producing work, using skills that I enjoy using, um, doing something I enjoy doing, then that helps me feel more like myself. And so that's my new goal in the future. And so that's really what I wanted to talk about. Was I just felt like I had to share this. This When I saw those warnings from those women, to trad wives, or people interested in that movement, I thought, it's more than just them that needs to hear that. We need to be pragmatic in the way we look at our lives in the future. I enjoy being a mother and being a homemaker. I enjoy a lot of aspects of it, but I'm not gonna lie to you. There's aspects of it I don't like, and there are a lot of times that I think, is this really the best use of my time? Not being a mother and serving my family, of course, that's a good use of my time. But I can do that and still not be spending big chunks of time on, organizing something in the kitchen and all, unless I just want to. Uh, and sometimes, and I do need to actually. That's on my list of things to do, is organize my kitchen and reorganize things. But I'm not gonna do it just because there's nothing else to do, or because that's my role in the world. It's because it benefits us. But there are other times where I'm like, wow, is this really the best way I could be using my time? I've been feeling antsy, I guess is what I'm trying to say, realizing that since I have learned over the past 9-10 years a lot about homeschooling, and my oldest is 15 now, my youngest is 10. I'm not spending a lot of time like I used to spend on trying to learn how to homeschool, even though things change every year and there are things I need to learn every year. It's not as big a part of my day as it used to be. So I do have some time that I can devote to something else. And unfortunately for me, some of that time has been spent on overthinking things and, and worrying about things like this. And so I thought, that's not a good use of my time just sitting here worrying about what the future might hold. I need to take some action. Just like I don't want to just complain, I want to solve problems. I don't want to just think, I want to do. And now I know what it is I need to be doing, which is doing all the things to make sure I exist on paper, to make sure that if anything should happen, I know what's going on. Something I've thought sometimes, because I've seen like preachers and Bible teachers and all admonishing women essentially to not worry about finances and that kind of thing. Let their husbands do that. If you're under the umbrella of the protection of your husband, then you live such a sweet life where you don't have to worry about these things. I just think, oh my gosh, that's terrible advice. Because number one way that men abuse, and here I am going off on a tangent, but one way that women experience abuse is financial abuse, where they're not allowed to have insight into their finances, where they're not allowed to see what's in their bank accounts, or to spend money, even go to the grocery store without being questioned about what they're spending at the grocery store, even if there's the money to not worry about it. And so that's not good. Number two, what if something were going to happen to your husband? What if his appendix burst and he's in the hospital for a few days? And, what if he gets really sick and isn't able to pay bills? Would you be able to pay those bills? Would you know what bills need to be paid and how they're being paid? Would you be able to do that if something were going to happen and your husband wasn't able to take care of those things for you? Because while some people say, well, being a good Christian woman means that you let your husband take care of those things, my response is, really? So if something happens to him then and you're left to do it, does that also mean that being a good Christian woman means making yourself and your family somebody else's problem, pulling somebody else in to try to figure all these things out for you? So that's a rabbit trail, but these are thoughts that I've had for a long time, years, and I didn't really know what to do with them. And I think it was watching that video last week, um, about the response to the trad wives, that everything kind of crystallized in my mind, and I realized, you know what? I need to protect myself and my children, our futures, in case, God forbid, something were going to happen. And I need to take steps to be a grown up, because we are women, we are not children. So I'm going to be a grown up and go and do all the things I need to do to be able to take care of my family if I need to. So those are my current thoughts. Let me know what you think, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.